It started as a normal Saturday, the kind of day where you can't shake the feeling that nothing interesting will ever happen again. The air was cool, but not crisp. My mind was foggy, but not quite numb. I had just wandered into Chinatown, hoping the winding alleys and bustling shops would somehow add some spark to the day. I'd been going there for years. It was always the same. Food stalls hawking dumplings, store windows full of trinkets, tourists elbowing past locals. But that day, I noticed something different. Tucked in a corner of an alleyway I'd never noticed before was a shop with a faded sign that simply read, "Herbal Remedies." It looked ancient, like it had been there long before the rest of the street around it. Maybe it had been. I don't know why I felt compelled to enter. I'm not a believer in alternative medicine, much less mysterious shops in unfamiliar corners of the city. But something about it drew me in. As I crossed the threshold, a bell tinkled softly above the door, as though I'd stepped into another time entirely. The place smelled strange, a mixture of musty herbs and something faintly metallic like blood or copper. I shivered, but curiosity propelled me forward. The shop was small, cluttered with rows of glass jars, each filled with powders, leaves, and strange liquids that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. The walls were lined with shelves, and every available surface was covered in oddities, small animal bones, dried insects, and talismans that looked hand-carved from old wood. I was inspecting a particularly unsettling jar that contained what looked like a human tooth when a voice spoke from the shadows behind the counter.
Looking for something in particular?
The voice was quiet, but there was something in it that made my skin crawl. I looked up to see an old woman, her face wrinkled like parchment, with eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light around them. She was small, hunched over slightly, and her gnarled fingers rested on the counter, tapping rhythmically. "I'm just looking," I stammered. "I didn't even know this shop was here." Her lips curled into a thin smile, but it didn't reach her eyes.
You came for a reason,
She said, almost whispering.
No one comes here without a reason.
I didn't know how to respond, so I just stood there awkwardly. My eyes wandered to a display case near the counter. Inside were small, round cakes, or maybe cookies, though they were darker than anything I'd ever seen. They looked like they were made of blackened dough with small flecks of green throughout like moss. "What are those?" I asked, pointing at the strange pastries. Her smile widened.
Ah, those are a special treat.
She said, her voice like silk now.
Very rare. Very potent.
I felt a strange pull toward them, as though my body was moving on its own. "What do they do?"
They help you see.
She said cryptically.
See what you're meant to be.
I hesitated. The idea of seeing what I was meant to be intrigued me, even though it sounded ridiculous. But there was something in the way she said it, something almost hypnotic. Before I could stop myself, I found myself asking how much they cost.
One is enough,
She said, her smile now more of a grin, revealing a set of teeth too sharp to be normal.
No charge. For you.
I should have walked out then. I should have said no thanks, and left. But my feet remained rooted to the floor, and before I knew it, I was reaching into the display case and taking one of the dark pastries into my hand. It felt cool, almost unnaturally so, and the faint scent of something earthy, bitter, wafted up to my nose.
Eat it here.
She said softly.
I insist.
Everything about the situation screamed danger, but it was like my body was no longer my own. I took a bite. The taste was bitter and strange, but not unpleasant. It had an almost metallic aftertaste that lingered on my tongue as I chewed. For a moment, nothing happened. I swallowed, waiting for some dramatic change, but there was only silence. I glanced at the old woman. She was watching me intently, her dark eyes glistening in the low light.
How do you feel?
She asked. I don't know. Fine, I think, I said. But then something changed. The room seemed to tilt slightly, as though the ground had shifted beneath my feet. The jars on the shelves began to blur, and the air around me felt thick, like it was pressing against my skin. My stomach churned, a sharp pain twisting inside me. I doubled over, clutching my abdomen as the pain grew worse. It felt like something was crawling under my skin, like tiny, invisible claws raking through my insides. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, I could feel my teeth, growing, elongating. My gums were splitting as sharp, jagged teeth pushed through them, the taste of blood filling my mouth. Panicking, I reached up to my face, only to find my hands weren't hands anymore. The fingers had twisted, elongating into sharp, talon-like claws. My skin felt tight, like it was being stretched over something larger, something monstrous. I could feel bones shifting beneath the surface, cracking and reforming. My spine arched painfully as my body grew, muscle and sinew bulging unnaturally. I stumbled toward a small mirror hanging on the wall, hoping it was all some kind of hallucination, some terrible trick of the mind. But the reflection staring back at me was not human. The creature in the mirror was hunched, covered in dark mottled skin that looked more like scales than flesh. Its face, my face, was elongated, almost reptilian, with glowing yellow eyes that burned with a feral intensity. My jaw hung open, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth, and a low, guttural growl rumbled from deep within my chest. What is happening to me? I tried to speak, but the words came out garbled, distorted. I turned toward the old woman, but she was gone. In her place, there was only a dark shadow that seemed to ripple and shift, a hollow, echoing laugh filling the air. "You are becoming," the voice whispered, "becoming what you were always meant to be." I staggered back, crashing into one of the shelves, sending jars tumbling to the floor. The pain was overwhelming now, my body convulsing as it continued to change, continued to morph into something grotesque, something inhuman. I had to get out. I had to escape before whatever was happening to me consumed me entirely. With a surge of adrenaline, I bolted for the door, smashing through it with a strength I didn't know I had. The cold air hit me like a shock, but it did nothing to slow the transformation. People in the street screamed and scattered as I stumbled out, their faces twisted in horror as they caught sight of the monster I had become. I tried to speak, to tell them I wasn't a threat, that I was still human somewhere inside this nightmare, but all that came out was a deep, guttural roar. The world around me was spinning, my vision blurred by the overwhelming sensory overload. I could hear everything, every footstep, every breath, every heartbeat around me. The smells were overpowering, the scent of fear and flesh filling my nostrils, awakening something primal inside me. I stumbled into an alley, collapsing against the brick wall, my body still convulsing with the final stages of the transformation. I could feel the hunger now, a deep, gnawing hunger that clawed at my insides, demanding to be sated. I was losing control. Whatever I had become, it was taking over. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the transformation stopped. The pain subsided, leaving me panting and shaking on the cold, hard ground. I looked down at my hands, or what had once been my hands. They were still claws, dark and twisted, but I could feel them, move them, control them. I was a monster, but I was still me. For now. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't last. The hunger was still there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to take control again. And when it did, I wasn't sure I'd be able to stop it. I wasn't sure I'd want to.